So writing to deadlines, it's always about good planning. So write what you can as soon as you can. Don't delay it. And if you know the background of the story, but not the outcome, script and maybe edit the background material as soon as you can or as soon as possible. Some stories might even have two possible outcomes. Write both versions because you're not exactly sure which one might go to print or to broadcast. So if you're missing key details, anything you can't confirm or might change close to the deadline could be left for the intro. So make sure you just write the whole story and fill in the details later, and you can always add it in your piece to camera, whether it's at the end or at the intro at the start. Okay, so before we go any further, there's another sample script I have for you. This is one of my previous students called Jessica Millwood, who now works at Channel 9 in Brisbane. I've just checked the link. That link to this story is not there anymore, but I did break it down when it was, and it's similar to the story with the Northcliffe Rescue. So it's basically just another opportunity for you to see how a template's used. And there is some formula to news stories. They change a little bit, as you saw from the Northcliffe story compared to this one, compared to the one that you saw in Barbara Allison's example. But they've all got the same building blocks. So that's the most important thing. And now that's quite important because if we go out of our PowerPoints now and go back into our Blackboard site, we're going to talk about the assessment item for our first case study. Now, it's all based on news stories. So let's go to assessment tasks and submission. This will tell you, this is where you submit it. This is the case study. It's worth 20%, 700 words. It's due on the 7th of April. And this is where you submit it, okay? But for the information, you need to actually go into the unit information guide, which is up here. And I've already downloaded the PDF, so it's up here for me, but you can either view it on the web or download the PDF. And this will give you detailed instructions on how you need to complete your assessment items. Now, if you already know how to do it, you probably don't need to go any further in this lecture. But for the people that would like me to go through it in a bit more detail, I'm going to do that now for you. Okay? So, assessment details. It requires you to examine a television news report and conduct a textual analysis of the use of image and text and their interaction. The choice of news report is up to you. Choose one between 90 seconds and 2 minutes. The following elements must be included in your analysis. Now, before I go any further, all the stuff I did previously in part 1 of this lecture covers all this stuff for you. Now, the things it doesn't cover is the readings, which gives you the theory behind stuff. So you'll actually need to do the readings for the first 4 weeks, and I'll go through that in a minute for you. But all the other stuff we talked about in the lecture, and there's plenty of opportunities to practice that in the tutorials. So number 1 is a content audit of image and text, and we'll talk about that in a second. Discuss the news values contained in the news report. How are the news values represented through image and audio text, and how do the image and audio text interrelate in communicating both news information and news values? Now, we talked about news values last week, so you should know all about those. And they're in the readings too. And then I want you to reflect on how the news images and text contribute to the reporting of the news, with reference to the institutional positions of the news organisation and its audience. And then critically reflect on the purpose and relevance of analysing images in news discourse. And we want them all referenced using the Harvard style. So the most important thing here is that you need to do the readings. So the first 4 weeks of this unit include readings on discourse and textual analysis. You should work through these methodically week by week, and they're designed to provide you with analytical skills to successfully complete assignment 1. And not only that, it'll also teach you the background and the theoretical understanding of what news stories are all about, okay? So I'll show you what the readings are in a second, but just to go through on how to approach each one. So there's instructions here, as Bednarik has put down in one of the readings, and it's very similar to what I did for you in the templates. So I don't mind if you use this format or you use my format, but it basically does the same thing here. Now you can even insert screenshots from the clips, which I didn't do in my my template, but you can do that. Okay. So just remember the word count is not part of the content audit. All this stuff here is not included in the word count. The word count is the analysis, and it should be in an essay form. And if you're not sure about the Harvard referencing system, you can go to LibGuides there, take that link over, and as you can see, as I hover over the top of it, there's a little hand that lets me click straight to it. So a checklist. Your assignment will comprise of your case study, including your content audit table and description, links to the analysed news report, as I have done previously, and a reference list in Harvard format. Okay. And as I showed you before, the assignment submission should be as a single Word document or DOCX file. Nothing else, please. Don't put PDFs up there. Don't put PNGs, anything else like that. Okay, it's got to be a Word doc so then I can give you some feedback. So what are we looking for? This is the assessment criteria. This is how we'll mark it for you. The analysis, the critical reflection, the research, your written expression, and how you submit it, okay? Does the case study meet the content requirements of the assignment in regards to length, component, and tasks? And is it submitted according to instructions contained in the assignment outline? Now, I'm not going to read all this, the rest of it for you, because you can do that in your own time. And I won't take up your time while you're trying to go through this. But let's go back to our unit information guide or our Blackboard site and show you where the readings are, okay? So my readings, you click on there. There's a pop-up blocked, so I'm not sure what's happening there, but let's just have a quick read through. Okay, so there's the assigned textbook, the Electronic Reporter, Broadcast Journalism in Australia. It's an ebook, so everyone can have it, so there's no excuse for not reading it. And now, all this stuff here you can view online. So, our introductions, the newsroom, our textual analysis readings for week 1. So we've got news values and news culture in the changing world. Restating news values, contemporary criteria for selecting the news. We talk about news values, so you need to know those. News packaging, the stuff we talked about today in the lecture. And television news and current affairs. So when you read that, you'll understand the different aspects of it. And what I'll do is, previously in part 1, I didn't go through a story on a current affairs. So I'll go back to that link and I'll show you an example from the ABC site. So week 2, media text, value add. And as you can see, all 4 weeks have text for your textual analysis readings. So all this stuff needs to be looked at and added in your analysis. Okay, up to week 4. So I'm not going to go into any more detail here because we're past where we should be, but this will help you get an excellent mark in your assessment items. Okay, now if we go back to our PowerPoint, let's look at my old one there, open recent, let's get in there, okay. All right, let's look at this page here. So that current affairs package, as I mentioned to you in the first part of the lecture, our news package is only 1.5 minutes. Our current affairs package is longer. Let's have a quick look in the UIG. How long we want that to be. 4 minutes, okay? And it's worth 40%. Now, as I mentioned before, it's where you can elaborate on a story and make a much more detailed overview of a news story. That link is to iView on ABC, so there's plenty of stories there, and there's some quite interesting stuff, very timely at the moment, especially on George Pell. So I might show you an example there and how they've nutted out a story. If you click on there, it'll take us to iView, which I already have open. And they tell you how long that I mentioned before. The current affairs stories can range from anywhere from 3 minutes up to an hour and a half, really, if it's a current affairs. But 3 minutes to 6 minutes. And if we look at on the George Pell one, as you can see, resume because I was already looking at it. It's 6 minutes. So let's have a quick watch on this. Or 5 minutes and 38.
George Pell is behind bars tonight, beginning.
And again, there's an introduction to the story, and that's the part of the introduction that we write for our news packages.
A 6-year prison sentence for sexually abusing 2 choir boys in the 1980s. The judge in the case described Pell's crimes as brazen, grave, and arrogant. Pell was a giant of Catholicism, not just in Australia, but also in the Vatican, where he was one of its most powerful officials. As Geraldine Doog reports from Rome, Pell's conviction is fueling more calls for radical change in the church.
Start thinking about what shots they're using, especially establishing shots now.
On the outside, the Vatican can appear as it always has, powerful, opulent even, and a firm custodian of tradition. But inside, the institution's reeling from a prolonged sex abuse scandal and the recent conviction of one Cardinal George Pell.
When you have a cardinal in jail, it is much bigger than anything that we have seen in the last few centuries, honestly. He is very well connected with Catholics in the US, in the UK, so he has been certainly one of the most powerful cardinals of these last 20-30 years.
Church historian Massimo Fagioli is an expert in Vatican power plays. He says that even before Pell's conviction, he cut a divisive figure in Rome. Did Cardinal Pell make real enemies here?
Well, every person who makes a decision in the Vatican makes enemies. This is not new.
There is talk that stories were planted in the Italian press that were not good for him.
Well, if you're referring to stories about his lavish lifestyle, allegedly lavish lifestyle, yes, the Italian press tends to have a very cozy relationship with the Vatican. So that happened, as it has happened for every high official.
Truth and justice, truth and justice. In response to scandals around the world, the Vatican convened an historic sex abuse summit at the end of February, bringing more than 100 bishops to Rome.
Dinanzi alla piaga degli abusi sessuali,
problems were admitted in public, itself almost unprecedented, with new rules about bishops' responsibilities and the formation of young priests. But those seeking dramatic change were disappointed.
If you have good laws but they have never been implemented, adding new laws can satisfy our sense for something concrete, but that was not the Catholic problem. The Catholic problem was basically ignoring, denying, dismissing.
One issue did emerge from the summit. As this ancient institution contemplates shaking up centuries-old practices, there are growing calls to give women a greater role in the church.
I think the sex abuse crisis and the summits that the Vatican hosted to try and deal with that, to try and bring church leaders from countries right across the globe on board with the changes and the reforms that he's looking for in this sense. Yes, I do think it's actually changing attitudes towards women as well.
Philippa Hitchen is a journalist based in Rome who actively supports the few women who do work inside the Vatican. She says while the Pope has made some progress, empowering women in the church is not his priority.
Well, I've been following Vatican affairs for over 30 years, and I actually do see changes are happening under Pope Francis. I think he does understand the importance of this issue, clearly, but again, he's the age that he is. He's the culture, the Latin American culture that he comes from. And I think, you know, it's not right at the top of his agenda.
Under existing canon law, laywomen can already be appointed to senior positions in the Vatican, but key roles are only now being offered to the laity, and so far only to men.
There is a lot of fear, yes, that this is the beginning of a slippery slope, if you like, and that it will lead to women demanding ordination to the priesthood as well.
Some women, like Susanna Flisowska, have given up working behind the scenes. She's a member of a 6-year-old lobby group, Voices of Faith, which is putting public pressure on the Vatican to let women in.
Are you seen as bomb throwers? Perhaps by some, yeah. There are plenty of places in the Vatican and on each other levels of the leadership and the Catholic Church that really may be filled by women. It's only culture, it's only prejudice that stops us.
But things move slowly at the Vatican, and those working for change are accustomed to waiting for it.
I wonder, does all this make you angry?
I've been around too long, I think, to feel angry about it. I think it is important to keep pushing for change from the inside.
Geraldine Doogue there in Rome.
Okay, so that story elaborated on George Pell and went into more detail about, you know, not just about Pell's conviction, but more about his background and the inequality overall. So that's the whole idea of a current affairs news story. You're going deeper into the story. So that's it for this week. We're not going to go into much more detail this week, but I hope you enjoy putting together your case study. And if you get lost, you can either send me an email, put it on the discussion board, or go back and look at your unit information guide. Okay, until next week, thank you very much.